Magandang araw po sa lahat. Ang aming tatalakayin na topic ngayong araw ay patungkol kay Isaac Newton at Galileo Galilei na sakop ng module sa Scientific Revolution. Pero bago ang lahat, hayaan nyo ipakilala ko muna ang miyembro ng Group 6. Ang unang tatalakayin ay patungkol kay Galileo Galilei.
Galileo Galilei born on February 15, 1564 in Pisa and died on January 8, 1642 near Florence at the age of 78. Galileo Galilei as an Italian scientist who formulated the basic law of falling bodies, which he verified by careful measurements. He constructed a telescope with which he studied lunar craters and discovered 4 moons revolving around Jupiter and espoused the Copernican cause. Galileo Galilei's parents were Vincenzo Galilei and Giulia Amanati. Vincenzo, who was born in Florence in 1520, was a teacher of music and a fine lute player. After studying music in Venice, he carried out experiments on strings to support his musical theories. Giulia, who was born in Pescia, married Vincenzo in 1563 and they made their home in the countryside near Pisa. Galileo was their first child and spent his early years with his family in Pisa. At Padua, Galileo began a long-term relationship with Maria Gamba, who was from Venice. Nagkaanak sila ngunit hindi nila nagawang magpakasal sapagkat ramdam ni Galileo na hindi sasapat ang kanyang pinansyal para sa ganoong sitwasyon. And in the year 1600, their first child, Virginia, was born, followed by a second daughter, Livia, in the following year. And in the year 1606, their son Vincenzo was born.
These are the major events in Galileo Galilei's life. He was the first of 6 children born into the Galilei family. Later on 1574, the Galilei family moved to Florence, Italy, and Galileo went to school Camaldolus Monastery in Vallombrosa. After that, on 1583, Galileo goes to the University of Pisa. Galileo originally studied medicine, but during his studies, he learned to love math and science. 1589, Galileo continued to study math after his time at the University of Pisa, which earned him minor teaching jobs. 1592, during his time teaching, Galileo conducted famous experiments with falling objects and other things. He also published a manuscript on force and motion going against Aristotle's views from years and years before. However, because of his views on physics, it isolated him from his fellow teachers, and his contract with the university was not renewed in 1592. Sadly, in 1591, Galileo's dad died. In 1593, he found work at another university. Galileo started to work at the University of Padua and quickly gained a following because of his exciting lectures. He had a long 18-year tenure at the university. Year 69. Galileo heard about the Dutch eyeglass maker who had reportedly developed an optical instrument. Galileo decided to make his own version. Once Galileo finished his telescope, he was the first person to use the optical instrument to study the stars. With his telescope, he studied the moon and found out it had craters instead of being smooth, which a popular belief at the time. 1610, Galileo published another book entitled The Starry Messenger. It was a tiny booklet describing Galileo's discoveries of the moon being rough and having craters instead of it being smooth. 1616. Galileo is accused of heresy by the church because he went against their teachings and was told by the church that he should never state publicly that the earth moved around the sun. 1642. Galileo goes on house arrest by the church because he was accused of heresy because he went against the church teachings. He died 6 years later on January 8, 1642. He died because of a fever and heart problems.
At ang kasunod naman na topic ay Galileo's job. Galileo is a natural philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician. Galileo was astronomer and he discovered moon has mountains, rings of Saturn, Milky Way made up of stars, Venus has spaces, and moon known to orbit a planet other than Earth. Galileo published a book about hydrostatic balance he invented. Galileo's first job was an art teacher. Nagsimula siyang magturo ng art sa Florence, Italy, ngunit hindi ito nagtagal sa kadahilan ng napansin ang kanyang mathematical at scientific power. Galileo began teaching mathematics first, private in Florence. Galileo was appointed professor of mathematics at the University of Padua. Who is the real inventor of a telescope? Many people believe that Galileo was the first inventor of a telescope. But in early 1600s, a telescope was made by a German-Dutch glassmaker Hans Lippershey. 1600s to 1600s was the year Lippershey developed his telescope. In May 1609, Galileo picked up Lippershey's telescope and began to improve it. Galileo was not the first inventor of a telescope, but his telescope was the first to be used as space observation and the first to aim one at the stars. Ngayon naman ay dumako tayo kay Isaac Newton.
Newton was born on January 4, 1643. He died on March 20, 1727. In 1703, he was elected as the President of the Royal Society, one of the greatest English mathematician, physicist, astronomer, theologian, and author. The son of the farmer who died 3 months before he was born. His education was interrupted by a fear which turned him into a farmer. Before enrolling at the University of Cambridge, Trinity College in 1661. 1665, he discovered the binomial theory. 1669, he became location professor in mathematics. 1668, he was invented the reflecting telescope, isang optical telescope na gumagamit sa kombinasyon ng mga kurbadong salamin, mga salamin, ilaw at bumubuo ng isang imahe. Year 1669, he became location professor in mathematics. 17th century, he discovered the gravity.
Sir Isaac Newton was born on December 25, 1642, but it was January 4, 1643 for us because that time nung pinanganak siya, gumagamit ng Julian calendar ang taga-inland while na-adapt na ng taga-ibang bansa ang Gregorian calendar. Some other people said then na si Newton is Galileo's incarnation because Galileo died the same time as Newton was born. In 1666 ay na-develop niya ang kanyang calculus theory pati na ang panimula sa kanyang 3 laws of motion at ang pag-discover sa gravity. And in 1687, he published his 3 laws of motion. Naantala ang kanyang pag-aaral because of may kumalat ng sakit sa Cambridge na nakamamatay na naging dahilan ng pagsasara nito. After nitong muling magbukas ay nag-aral muli siya dito para sa kanyang master's degree. And then after a few years nga, he became the professor of mathematics dito. In 1696, Sir Isaac Newton became the warden of the mint. During this time, the Royal Mint Britain finances were approaching crisis, up to 1 in 10 circulating coins believed to be forged. Dahil sa kanyang galing sa pag-iisip, nakagawa siya ng paraan para masolba itong problemang ito. Nirecheck niya yung mga coins, kung paano ginagawa, at sinusukat at gumawa siya ng paraan para sa mas magandang paraan ng paggawa ng pera. Dahil dito, in 1669, he became the master of the mint. Newton serves as the president of the Royal Society between 1703 to 1727, and his Philosophia Naturalis Principia Mathematica, also known as Principia, was printed under the Royal Society. Dahil sa kanyang galing at sa ganda ng kanyang mga ginawa like law of motion, law of gravitation, his discovery in gravity, at marami pang iba. In 1705, Newton was knighted by Queen Anne herself dahil sa mga ganda ng kanyang ginawa. So, unfortunately lang, life has ending at lahat ng bagay ay may katapusan. So, in 1727, March 20, Newton died in his sleep.
Ngayon, dumako naman tayo sa naging career at mga naging trabaho ni Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was one of the greatest English mathematician in his generation. Nagtayo siya ng mga foundation for differential and integral calculus. Ang mga gawa niya sa optics and gravitation ang naging daan upang mas makilala siya bilang isa sa pinakamahusay na scientist sa buong mundo. Newton's life can be divided into 3 distinct periods. Ang una nito ay simula sa kanyang pagkabata hanggang noong nagsisimula pa lamang siya sa pag-aaral sa Cambridge. At ang ikalwa ay ang pinaka-highly productive na parte sa kanyang buhay kung saan ay isa na siyang mathematics professor sa Trinity College, Cambridge. At ang ikatlo ay na nagkaroon siya ng mataas na posisyon sa London. Nag-aaral si Isaac Newton sa Trinity College, Cambridge, at noong April 25, 1664, he was elected a scholar and he received his bachelor's degree in 1665. At nung magsara naman ang university noong summer ng 1665, umuwi si Newton sa Lincolnshire at doon na niya sinimulan ang kanyang masusing pag-aaral sa mathematics, optics, physics, and astronomy. When the University of Cambridge reopened, doon pa lamang nakuha ni Newton ang kanyang master's degree. After 1 year, ay naging isa na siyang ganap na mathematics professor. Dahil ito sa tulong ng kanyang dating mentor na si Isaac Barrow. Dahil sa mga mathematical works ni Newton, napamangha niya si Barrow, kaya naman binigay nito ang kanyang pwesto kay Newton matapos itong mag-resign. Maiito rin naman na pinakamalaking achievement ni Isaac Newton ang mga gawa niya tungkol sa physics and celestial mechanics, which is culminated in his theory of universal gravitation. Noong 1666 ay mayroon na siyang 3 early version ng kanyang laws of motion. Isaac Newton was also invited to join the Royal Society of London. Ito'y matapos niyang ma-develop ang kanyang new and enhanced version of reflecting telescope. Isaac Newton also served 2 brief terms as the Member of Parliament for the University of Cambridge, mula 1689 hanggang 1690. At ayon sa sabi-sabi, ay minsan hindi ito nagbigay ng speech, at ang tanging naging komento lamang nito ay ang pagrereklamo sa malamig na hangin at pag-uutos upang isara ang bintana. Inilaan naman ni Isaac Newton ang huling 3 dekada ng kanyang buhay sa London, serving as Warden of the Royal Mint, Master of the Mint, as well as the President of the Royal Society. He was knighted by Queen Anne, the first scientist to be honored for his work. Ito rin ang naging rason why he was addressed as Sir Isaac Newton.
Newton's laws of motion. Newton's laws of motion is all about the relationship between an object's motion and the forces acting on it. It is categorized into 3: the law of inertia, law of interaction, and law of acceleration. So, the first law in Newton's law of motion is the law of inertia. In here, it states that an object at rest will remain at rest and an object in motion will continue moving unless acted by an unbalanced force. Inertia is a property of matter by which it continues in its existing state of rest or in motion. So, ang inertia po is the one that makes us resist change. So, if ang isang bagay is nakatigil or at rest, it will just continue to be at rest. And if an object is in motion naman po or nagalaw, it will continue moving at a straight line and at a constant speed unless may an unbalanced force na mangyari. Kahit po at rest or nakatigil ang isang bagay, there are 2 force na nakalagay dito, which is the gravitational force and the normal force. From the word gravity, which means na ito yung force na humihila sa atin to be stay on the ground, and normal force naman is nagpapanatili sa posisyon at pinagtatayuan ng isang bagay. The second law of motion is the law of acceleration. It focuses on the speed of a moving object. Dito ay pinag-aaralan natin at sinusukat kung gaano kabilis ang paggalaw ng isang bagay. There are 2 factors that can affect the speed and acceleration of an object. The first one is the force and the second one is its mass. So, meron tayong formula na ginagamit sa pag-solve at pagkuha ng acceleration. At makikita ito sa illustration na dito sa tabi. Para mas madali nating maintindihan ito and to interpret this, the formula in getting the acceleration is A equals F over m, or acceleration is equals to force over mass. The third law of motion is the law of interaction. For every action, there is an equal but opposite reaction. So, interaction happens on two objects in contact undergo collision. So, sa interaction po, it is on two objects na magkadikit which nag-exert yung isa ng force. So, ang react po ng isang object is ibalik yung force on a different direction.
At dito na po nagtatapos ang aming report tungkol kay Isaac Newton at Galileo Galilei.